On a cold, rainy morning in downtown Seattle, a single father named Ethan held a half-broken umbrella in one hand and a lukewarm cup of coffee in the other when he saw her again, sitting silently in the far corner of the small café, drenched, shivering, and staring at the untouched toast on the table. Her clothes were soaked, her hair tangled from the storm, and her eyes carried the kind of emptiness only people who've truly lost everything could understand. Ethan had been fighting his own storms, working 2 jobs, struggling to raise his little daughter Lily alone, barely making rent, but something in that woman's trembling hands and hollow expression pulled him toward her every single morning. He didn't even know her name, yet helping her felt like helping a part of himself he had long abandoned. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and humanity, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Grandma Dearie. Your support helps us spread more heart-touching stories like this one. Ethan first noticed the woman 3 weeks earlier when she sat outside the cafe in the freezing rain without a coat, staring at the concrete as if she expected answers to rise from it. Something inside him refused to walk past her. Maybe it was because he knew too well what rock bottom felt like: nights of counting pennies, days of skipping meals so Lily could eat, months of guilt after losing his wife to cancer and blaming himself for not saving her. Turning away from someone else's pain felt impossible. So he bought an extra sandwich every morning, pretending he simply accidentally bought 2, and gently placed one in front of the woman. She never asked, never looked him directly in the eyes, but her hands always trembled as she accepted the food. And every day after that, Ethan continued the same routine. The cafe owner would shake his head and whisper, "You're too soft-hearted, kid." But Ethan didn't care. Something about the woman's silence felt familiar, as though she was trapped in her own memories the same way he was. Her cheeks often looked raw from crying, her clothes too thin for the weather, and her eyes, though beautiful, carried a heavy grief he couldn't ignore. Sometimes he saw bruises she tried to hide, sometimes he noticed she slept sitting up, afraid to close her eyes. He started leaving Lily with a trusted neighbor so he could check on the woman longer. He didn't want her to disappear into the city the way too many broken souls did. Little by little, he saw changes. She began taking small bites instead of letting the food sit. She started sipping warm tea he bought instead of letting it cool untouched. Once, when he quietly placed a sandwich in her hands, she whispered a barely audible, "Thank you." It was the first time he had heard her voice. And although she still looked fragile and lost, something about the way she held the bread that day made him believe she was slowly trying to come back to life. On one morning, the rain poured harder than usual. Ethan walked into the cafe with soaked shoes, only to find the woman coughing violently. She struggled to breathe, her shoulders shaking horribly under her wet jacket. Without thinking twice, he sat beside her and held her trembling hands, warming them between his palms. She stared at him with wide, frightened eyes, as if unsure whether to trust him. He smiled softly, trying to reassure her. "You're safe," he whispered in his heart, though he did not speak the words aloud. She relaxed a little, and he felt her cold fingers slowly unclench. That was the morning he realized he wasn't helping a stranger anymore, he was helping someone he genuinely cared for. But everything changed on a Tuesday morning that began like all the others. The cafe bell rang, and Ethan walked in holding 2 breakfast sandwiches. The woman sat in her usual corner, clutching her arms for warmth, her eyes red as if she had cried all night. Ethan placed the sandwich on the table and was about to sit down when the cafe door slammed open with a violent burst. 4 well-built men in black suits marched inside, scanning the room with intense eyes. Behind them walked 2 sharply dressed lawyers with stern expressions. The cafe's customers fell silent, and even the rain outside seemed to pause. The woman froze instantly, her breath catching in her throat. Ethan could see pure terror in her eyes. One of the lawyers stepped forward and said her name, softly, respectfully, but it made her flinch as though she had been struck. Ethan realized she wasn't just poor or homeless. She was hiding from something, or someone. The taller lawyer slowly approached, speaking gently now, explaining that they had been searching for her for months. They said her family had hired them, that she had disappeared after suffering a traumatic incident, and that they had been terrified something terrible had happened to her. The 4 bodyguards stood back, clearly only there to ensure her safety, not to intimidate. Ethan could feel the weight of her fear, the confusion swirling in her eyes, and the silent plea she gave him as though begging him not to let them take her. But then something changed. One of the lawyers handed her a small, waterproof bag, the kind only expensive firms used. Inside was a photograph of her with 2 elderly parents, smiling, their faces filled with worry and love. Her hands shook uncontrollably, but as she stared at the photo, her expression softened. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. She wasn't being hunted, she was being rescued. The lawyers thanked Ethan when they realized what he had done for her. They had already spoken to the café owner and gathered pieces of her daily routine. They told Ethan that the woman had once been a successful artist, but after experiencing a violent assault and betrayal from someone she trusted, she had spiraled into trauma, running away from everything familiar. She had lost her sense of safety, her sense of self, and her will to face the world. But Ethan's small acts of kindness had been the tether that kept her from falling completely apart. As she stood to leave with them, she turned to Ethan with tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she looked directly into his eyes, not with fear, but with gratitude so deep it felt like a warm light in the cold café. She placed her hand over the sandwich he had given her, then pressed her other hand gently over his. She couldn't speak, but she didn't need to. Ethan understood. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Grandma Dearie so more souls can experience these emotional journeys. Before you read the final lines, please comment below. Kindness always returns. The woman left surrounded by bodyguards, protected and safe for the first time in months. Ethan watched her go with a bittersweet ache in his chest. He didn't know if he would ever see her again, but he knew this: his small acts of compassion had become the turning point in someone else's life. And as he walked out of the café into the cold Seattle rain, he held his head a little higher. Because sometimes, even when life breaks you, kindness has the power to build someone else back up, and in doing so, it quietly heals you too.